Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the Path to Liberty. I'm Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the Fast Friday edition of the show for June 2nd, 2023. And today I'm going to briefly go over some of Benjamin Franklin's warnings about executive power and human nature and power in general. And I think after hearing a few of the things that he had to say, primarily at the Philadelphia Convention, but we can also go way back, I think you'll think like I do that he pretty much called it. Anyways, let's start out with this one here from the Philadelphia Convention, June 4th, 1787. He noted that the first man put at the helm will be a good one. Everyone was expecting George Washington. Everyone wanted him there. Very few did not. And they really, really respected him. But he said nobody knows what sort may come after. He said the executive will be always increasing here as elsewhere, till it ends in a monarchy. And whether it was a hereditary monarchy or an elected monarchy or just one in name only, the end result, as Franklin is predicting, is with one person in power. One person with so much power, it would continue to grow because we know that power always seeks to expand, consolidate, centralize, and grow and grow and grow. And eventually you're going to get an unlimited despot, whether it's named that way or not. And I think this really comes from his understanding of human nature and the nature of power itself. We can go all the way back to some of his classic short quips in Poor Richard's Almanac here from 1733. He said, "Distrust and caution are the parents of security." Now, if you could apply this to just about anything and everything, but if we're talking about this particular situation, you have to distrust people with power if you want security in your liberty. You have to be cautious about who is there and what you authorize them to do, how much power you give them. If you want to be secure in your liberty, your property, your lives, etc. And he had the same kind of a message here. And again, Poor Richard's Almanac, 1755, "The wolf sheds his coat once a year, his disposition never." And how many times we heard someone running for office where they say all the things that we like to hear, but as soon as they win, then all of a sudden it's a different tune and they make all kinds of excuses. And that's because the people who are drawn to be the head dude in the largest government in the history of the world, well, those people are wolves. And no matter how good they may sound on the way there, once they have power, the real disposition never goes away. Now back to the Philadelphia Convention. Here he is, June 2nd, 1787. He said, "There are two passions which have a powerful influence on the affairs of men. These are ambition and avarice, the love of power, and the love of money. Separately," he said, "each of these has great force in prompting men to action, but when united in view of the same object, they have in many minds the most violent effect." So if you just have love of power or love of money, that's bad enough. But when you put them together, that's going to create some pretty nasty situations. He said, "Place before the eyes of such men a post of honor that shall be at the same time a place of profit, and they will move heaven and earth to obtain it." Now, he was primarily in this context arguing against a salary for the executive branch, for the president. And I think they make somewhere around $400,000 a year, but that's nothing compared to the amount of power and profit they get in many other ways. It may not be overt. It may not be someone signing them a check directly, paying them for this, but they certainly gain power and profit through book deals and speaking fees and influence and control, etc., in many ways. And so we still have this same type of a scenario today. And I think Franklin's warning is incredibly important. Now, he recognized that this type of problem could not just be resolved by choosing a new person to be the executive from time to time. If you have the wrong structure, it doesn't matter. You're going to get the wrong type of people there, and they're going to try to expand power over and over and over. This is just human nature. And he gave this example of how this played out regarding a total veto in Virginia, or not Virginia, Pennsylvania, the negative of the governor in Pennsylvania. He said that negative was constantly made use of to extort money. No good law whatever could be passed without a private bargain from him. And this is basically lobbying in the mid-18th century. Lobbying of today takes a different form on the surface, but ultimately they're making deals. Hey, we're gonna support your pet project. We'll support your friends. We'll funnel money to these candidates, whatever it may be. There is an exchange. There's a quid pro quo that happens between people in power and lobbyists. He said an increase of his salary or some donation was always made a condition, till at last it became the regular practice to have orders in his favor on the treasury presented along with the bills to be signed so that he might actually receive the former before he would sign the latter. I'm not signing this until I get that farm. I'm not signing this until I get a bunch of loot. And in many ways, I think this is exactly how it plays out today. A little different scenario in how the process goes, different mechanism, but the end result, I think, is the same. Now, in Franklin's mind, this was all about incentives, the type of people who would be drawn to the office, the type of people who wanted to be in a position of power, and even more so today when it's the office of the largest government in history. He said, and what kind of men, and what kind are the men that will strive for this profitable preeminence? Through all the bustle of cabal, the heat of contention, the infinite mutual abuse of parties, tearing to pieces the best of characters. Think about it. You and I probably would say over and over and over, oh, if I had power, I would do the right thing. I would not exercise it. Give it back to the people where it belongs. But ultimately, people like us aren't drawn to go through this process. We don't have the influence, the money, and the power. We're not even interested in that type of a life. We just want to live our lives. And the people who are drawn to it are far different. He said, it will not be the wise and the moderate, the lovers of peace and good order, the men fittest for the trust. It will be the bold and the violent, the men of strong passions and indefatigable. I got that one right. Indefatigable activity in their selfish pursuits. These will thrust themselves into your government and be your rulers. And I think if you're going to be honest about it, this is once again, he nailed it. Now, he also warned on June 2nd that this was going to be kind of a self-perpetuating problem. Again, you can't just replace the people because the structure itself is what the problem is. He said, there will always be a party for giving more to the rulers, that the rulers may be able in return to give more to them. Mike Maharrey describes it this way. This is an article we published a couple of days ago. I will actually link to all these original source documents, Maharrey's article, and some other interesting stuff, plus all the different platforms we're on, audio and audio-only podcast edition and all the video platforms. I publish a blog post about 1 to 2 hours after the live stream is done here over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path-to-liberty. So you can read this all in context and learn more on your own time. Here's how Maharrey put it. Franklin said the government would eventually become a mechanism to enrich those who hold power at the expense of the general population. Doesn't that sound familiar, right? When that happens, Mike writes, large numbers of people will grow to resent supporting this mechanism. Franklin warned about what would happen, warfare between the governing and the governed. Now, ultimately, Franklin was a student of history, and so were so many in the founding generation. Unlike today, we just have an attention span of 5 minutes before, maybe even less, and 5 minutes after, and that's it. Everything is forgotten, nothing ever learned. I oftentimes just blame the education system, but we have to be hungry for knowledge. And here's Franklin. As all history informs us, there has been in every state and kingdom a constant kind of warfare between the governing and the governed. He knew how this type of thing would play out, and when too few people had too much power, this would certainly be worse and worse and worse. He continued, the one striving to obtain more for its support, and the other to pay less. And this has alone occasioned great convulsions, actual civil wars, ending either in dethroning of princes or enslaving of the people. He understood history, and the entire founding generation looked at history to say, well, if this type of scenario happened there, and then if we have the same type of scenario here, we shouldn't be surprised if we get the same results. Now, Maharrey puts it this way, because government has the power, it usually wins this war between the governing and the governed. And this from Franklin, the revenues of princes constantly increasing, and we see that they are never satisfied, but always in want of more. And whether it's just pure revenue or revenue to dole out to give themselves more power, to give to their friends, to set up for later on, whatever it may be, this is certainly the situation. Power always expands, expands, and expands. Here's how Franklin put it. The more the people are discontented with the oppression of taxes, the greater need the prince has of money to distribute among his partisans and pay the troops that are to suppress all resistance and enable him to plunder at pleasure. I could probably spend a half hour just on this one quote, but if you think about all the kind of deals and handouts and welfare programs that are made not really with a view of helping people, but a way of making people think they're being helped by government or one team or one person in order to, well, win the Electoral College. It's really just a matter of manipulation and influence. And then if you look at the, well, more money to pay the troops to suppress all resistance, one only need to look at expansion of armed, kind of a de facto standing army that we really have today under the IRS, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the ATF, the DEA, and so many others. The Social Security Administration, these are all really armed up. And why? They're not using it against foreign enemies. It's certainly a war between the governed and the governing. Meharry sums it up like this. Many of the things that Benjamin Franklin warned about have come to pass, particularly his prediction that the bold and the violent, the men of strong passions and indefatigable activity in their selfish pursuits would thrust themselves into government. That should be so obvious at this point. Mike writes, we've also seen the development of factions and constant warfare between the governing and governed. The lesson is pretty straightforward. We can't wish away human nature. The type of people who are going to want to be holding the reins of so much power are not the good guys. It's the people who don't want that power who are the good guys. We can't trust people with power. We can't trust anyone with power, including the people who say, don't trust anyone with power. You shouldn't trust me. You shouldn't trust anyone. That's the nature of, well, we're flawed creatures, us humans. Now, I've cited this many times, and this isn't specifically about the executive branch, but on what we call Constitution Day today, September 17th. This is the closing of the Philadelphia Convention, 1787. Franklin is making a motion for everyone to support the document, but he's saying he doesn't necessarily like all of it. And everyone knows what that is. Of course, one of the primary parts is the singular consolidated power in the executive branch, but he said there is no form of government but what may be a blessing to the people if well administered. So if there's good people doing the right thing, respecting the lives, liberties, and property of the people, then it'll be good. But if you're relying on human nature, you're in big trouble. He said, I believe further that this is likely to be well administered for a course of years and can only end in despotism, as other forms have done before it, when the people shall become so corrupted as to need despotic government, being incapable of any other. Well, I hope you guys found this interesting. I hope it was educational. I hope it made you think. I hope you learned something. I hope you have a great weekend. And of course, if you want to help us get this kind of message out to more people, nothing helps us in that work every single day more than the financial faith and support of our members. You can join us for as little as $2 a month. Throw some of that dirty government fiat our way, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members, and we will use it to take a stand for the Constitution and liberty, no matter what the government happens to like. When they refuse to do their job, which is constantly 24/7, 365, we also have annual, lifetime, 5-year options. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Again, I really appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you learned something. I hope you have a great weekend. And I hope to see you next week here on the Path to Liberty.